Okay, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. A really cool review for you guys from the brand Yema. They are a historic revival brand, and they've really been a part of French watchmaking since 1948. Now, in terms of the type of watches, what we have here today are dive watches. Some key characteristics and design language you're looking for a dive watch. Of course, you're going to find water resistance, typically some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. These are their newer Navygraf Super Compressors, and they're essentially a modern tribute to vintage dive watch design. The Navygraf Super Compressor features a spring-loaded case back, a 300-meter water-resistant stainless steel case with dual crowns, and an internal rotating bezel. Special thank you to Yema for lending in these units to share with you all. These go for $990 direct from the brand, and they do come with a mesh bracelet as well as a rubber tropic style strap that are included at that price point. And the particular rubber strap showcased here is actually an upgraded model, which goes for $269, and it is an FKM Viton strap with their deployant clasp, and it is a very, very nice upgrade and seriously nice and great to have at the 19mm width, because that is going to be a bit of a limiting factor for these pieces. But it's nice to see that right from the factory they have some really outstanding options that are going to be available, whether you're looking for something more value driven in the fact that it comes with a beautiful high polished mesh as well as that tropic style. It's nice to see that you can also go more upscale and upgrade to this really nice black FKM strap. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. Okay guys, now these are both very handsome pieces here. They have a very clean aesthetic, and I have to say I'm very impressed. And another thing that's quite impressive is going to be the in-house nature of these timepieces. I mean, this is real French watchmaking, especially considering that they do have their own in-house calibers. Of course, these calibers haven't been around for 40, 50, 60 years. So they're not going to be, probably quite as tested as some of the more grounded Japanese and Swiss options you might be used to. But the nice thing is that these French calibers, I mean, in my experience, have held up very well. And I think they're really well spec'd competitively, especially considering their price points. A lot of brands, when they kind of move into more in-house production, they tend to raise their prices pretty dramatically. I like that here. I mean, you're getting these for still under $1,000, and they're definitely taking an extra level of pride. Now, when it comes to the dimensions, let's just focus on the black for now. Ooh, check that out. All right. Dimensions are fantastic here, guys. 38.5mm diameter. So for a watch in this style, it just comes together really quite beautifully. 13.5mm thick, which isn't the thinnest, but I wouldn't necessarily call it thick. I do actually kind of like that it has almost a puck-like, I would say, structure to it, or silhouette. I feel like it just gives it a really cool, like, tooly aesthetic. And that's one of the things that, with dive watches, you hear the term dress diver. There's a lot of brands that have kind of started making dive watches really focus on being these very everyday, very sleek pieces. What I like here is that it still has this kind of robust vibe that is a nice callback to just simpler times. Even, the fact that this is a true compressor case. A lot of you guys see the dual crown, that those have been popular, but in terms of this being a true compressor watch, I love that it's not just the, the aesthetic. You're actually getting the functionality, where this is actually going to increase its water resistance the deeper you go. In terms of the lug to lug, just 46mm, which is going to be very nice for a lot of different wrists. And you can see that the lug shape there, they do have a nice curvature that are going to hug the wrist quite nicely. You do have a sapphire that is double dome, so when you even have it at very harsh angles, guys, guess what? Besides the camera not wanting to focus on it, you can see it's still very legible. There's not a lot of distortion there, and that's because it's curved on the outside as well as the underside. So that's going to be really fantastic for legibility. The bezel is internal, so it's nice that this is a screw down crown. So if you can just lock this in, leave it. So those of you like me who really always want to make sure everything's lined up beautifully while you're not using it, it's not going anywhere. You're not going to accidentally turn it. And the nice thing is when you unscrew it, there's going to be a little bit of space there. So essentially you're going to have this being a bi-directional setup, which is perfect. You don't need it to be unidirectional because you're going to be screwing down the crown and locking in whatever time that you're going to be using, right, when you're setting this up before a dive, or just to time, you know, whatever you're cooking or any appointment that you have going on at the time. So very, very useful from that perspective. And the nice thing is with this setup, again, without having clicks, the nice thing is you can just zero it in, get it nice and lined up, screw it down, and you can see there, guys, even as I'm reaching around a tripod with a big camera in front of me, this is all still very intuitive. Let's actually pick up the blue here. This is gorgeous, guys. Check out this mesh. I love that they went with the high polish. It just gives it that factor, that X factor here. And it just plays into the retro vibe, especially with this vibrant blue dial. I like that it is brighter, but it's not a bright blue. It's just not super dark. It's a nice medium, I'd say more royal blue. There's no hints of purple or green hues. It's just a very true blue, which I think is great and makes it very versatile. And I mean, perfect to wear with any pair of blue jeans. You know, and of course, if you're going to be out in the water, then you're not really worried about coordination of color or anything like that. But I think this is a really nice hue. And I typically skew more towards darker blues. Now, of course, with the manipulation of this crown, that's going to be for the inner rotating bezel. And then this crown is going to be for setting the time. So very nice, very evenly spaced. You have one, of course, very clearly aligned with the 2 o'clock, the other at the 4 o'clock. That's not always the case with these types of offset crowns. So it's really nice, again, to see that alignment and just that extra level of care within their design aesthetic. Now, getting to the case back, guys, a very clean, nice embossed case back with some etching around the outer portions. Let me give it a quick little wipe here. This is a cool one. And the nice thing is, again, although you can't see that movement, you do have something pretty nice to look at as well. So very, very cool here, guys. Let's actually get this put together so you can see it's very simple. Essentially, once you have this length set, that stays there and you don't have to worry about it in the future. You just lock that in, boom, and it's a nice closed setup. Very clean, very, very handsome, again, with that beautiful high polish. And the case does have a mixture of brushing and polished accents, and I think it flows quite nicely. Now, getting to this setup, let's actually take a look here. Very nice, I would say, similar to the, you know, the deployant clasp you might find on an Omega style of piece there. Very nice where everything is under tucked and clean, so you don't have any loose tongue, which is great. And let me get that popped in. You do have 2 points of entry, so 1 peg there, 1 there, and then of course this higher one is going to lock in to that push button setup. It is very clean and very tidy. Now, the movement here, guys, that I kind of touched on, it's going to be their in-house French automatic caliber Yema 2000. I've reviewed quite a few models with this Yema 2000 movement in them, and they've always been pretty well. I actually do have even a couple of Yema watches from way back that have these movements, and they're doing great. They have a 42-hour power reserve and still beat at 4 hertz. So that's 28,800 vibrations per hour in terms of the beat rate. So you're getting that nice traditionally smooth sweep. These are also adjusted to plus or minus 10 seconds per day, which I think is pretty outstanding. Again, especially for under $1,000. And yes, these are French watches. So even if you wanted to get them chronometer certified, it's just, you know, you would have to buy one of their Swiss made variations, which I think they recently rolled out, and it's not for every watch. But it's funny that even, Yema, the brand, consider those some of their more affordable options. They consider these in-house options to be more of their peak models. And I think that's really awesome. And when you think about the max rate on these guys, that's plus or minus 25 seconds per day. So that's like the furthest variance. And that's pretty standard, even compared to something like an ETA 2824 or Sleeta SW200. And that's all the way up to like a top grade. That's going to be similar in terms of that window. Now, coming to the dials on these, they're quite handsome. I love how clear and just balanced and symmetrical they are. Of course, everything is pretty much printed in terms of the indexes there. And you are getting grade A Super Luminova BGW9s. You're going to get beautifully white, crisp, legible dials in the daylight, and then in the darkness, you're going to have a nice blue glow to it. These are 30 bar or 300 meters of water resistance, which is fantastic. Again, for the feeling in terms of how robust these are and how well built they are, it's great to see that they do have a commensurate water resistance. Sometimes you have these watches that feel nice and robust and overbuilt, and then you have something like 100 or 150 meters of water resistance, and it just makes you kind of scratch your head a little bit. It's nice to feel like, okay, this does feel like a more robust piece, and it also has the capabilities in terms of the dive chops and that water resistance to kind of back that up, right? So that little tool-like, this almost feels like a gauge, and feeling like a tool and like a hockey puck on your wrist. Like, that aesthetic is really cool, especially when you tie into the fact that, yeah, you are getting this in-house movement. You're getting this original design that does have really great historical callbacks. And then, just the fact that this is really a capable piece with that true compressor nature in terms of the case technologies of water resistance. Now, the one thing that can be a bit of a drawback for some folks is going to be the fact that it does have a 19 millimeter lug width. So all your 20 millimeter straps would be a little bit smushed in here. And if you have 18 millimeter straps, will be a little bit of a gap. And then, of course, there are a lot of aftermarket 19 millimeter strap options that are out there. But the nice thing, again, is that when you purchase these, you're going to get it on two really fantastic straps. Of course, this one is an upgrade, but I did want to showcase that option for you guys, because I think this thing is really immaculate. And when I saw the price, I definitely had questions like, how good is this? And I have to say, this feels fantastic. And I love the fact that this is coming directly from Yema, so that this is going to be, fully branded, feels like a complete piece, versus sometimes, you don't always want to throw on something that feels aftermarket that can kind of detract away from the particular branding. And if you're a big fan of French watchmaking and the Yema brand, of course, you're going to want to have everything signed beautifully and matching and feeling quite complete. So very, very cool. And both of these actually have a nice taper to them. Even the mesh tapers down about 1 millimeter, which is nice. And with how thin it is, I think it all works and feels very balanced. So 19 tapering down to about 18. And then on the rubber, I want to say it tapers down even more. So very, very cool. But with that said, let's actually get these on the wrist and see how they wear. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, still plenty of wrist presence, but still also quite versatile and tidy. Not feeling oversized at all, guys. Remember, these are just 38 millimeters, but you do have a very small outer bezel and of course a thick inner bezel. So that's the nice thing. You're kind of getting the best of both worlds in terms of balance, right? You're getting a physically small silhouette, but you're getting a large full-faced dial that really sings in terms of just nice, clear, legible, open space that is very, very balanced. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you're going to notice that the watch just appears quite large, a lot larger than it does down here, right? So what I like to do is actually keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame so you guys can get a bit of a true aspect ratio, but still a nice detailed look at how this may lay on your own wrist. And yes, my 7.5-inch wrist is on the slightly larger side of average, but it's also quite round and it's not super wide and flat and accommodating. So I am still concerned with things like ultimate lug to lug and, just general proportions and making sure that a watch fits and looks great. And I think in terms of the aesthetic here, this looks amazing. And sure, it could probably be a little bit thinner, but again, I don't see this as an overly thick watch. I see it as this is a tool watch. This is a diver, and maybe they could have made it thinner if they wouldn't have made it a true compressor. But for those of you guys that are like me, that can be a bit eccentric, that are watch collectors, that can, that are quite enthusiastic about things, it's nice to have that. And I think some people are fine with that trade-off. It's kind of like, different folks are, fine with different trade-offs with a case back, whether it be display and adding a little thickness, or saying, hey, just enclose everything up and let's make it as thin as possible. There's going to be different trade-offs for different collectors, but I have to say the way that this sits, the way that it lays, again, quite nice. And no, it's not some slim, svelte, thing. It definitely has a robust tool vibe, which I think is great. Again, especially considering that it ties into that compressor nature. In terms of the additional technology that's in there. And, this isn't just for aesthetics. This thing looks really great, but it also performs, in a way that really pays tribute and honors this design style. So with that said, let's go ahead and get these off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Yes, check out that beautiful blue Lume. Really nice little surprise there to have the seconds hand fully lumed. And although it's not like radiantly bright or anything like that, like you might get from a Lollipop Pip, I think it is a nice little trade-off. Again, not everything is perfect, especially considering that everyone has different preferences. So for me, as a longtime collector, I definitely find, for me, it's like I find joy within those kind of offsets and imperfections and things that just make watches different and stand out from each other, because then it gives me reasoning to wear a bunch of different watches and have an excuse to just love this hobby and try new things. But one thing I always like to work in is a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And you guys can see those matted dials. I think they play beautifully, and they really work to give this a nice balance between retro and modern, right? The flatness, the cleanliness of this Lume, right? There's no faux tina or anything like that. This just reads as a clean, modern piece. But then the nice thing is that it also has, again, those vintage chops to back it up in terms of just the design aesthetic and the functionality of the true compressor case. So, guys, these just look immaculate. I'm really digging it. I mean, which dial do you prefer? I'm pretty torn. I feel like the black, of course, is very, very classic, goes with everything, but this blue, I have some good feelings that this blue would look amazing on a gray rubber strap, or even a gray NATO. And I think about that, and I think, that's just a watch that I want to wear. The nice thing about the black is that it's so versatile that it's a watch that you can always wear, right? There's nothing that this is going to clash with. It's going to always be ready. And I like that, again, you can really play up the different aesthetic. Of course, that Milanese mesh has a beautiful, more retro vibe to it, whereas you can upgrade again and make this feel a little bit more deliberately modern and contemporary with that beautifully done upgraded rubber strap, which, again, from a performance standpoint, is pretty tough to beat. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into some closing thoughts. Guys, on the wrist, these wear just about perfectly while striking a great balance of functional heft and retro modern stylings. In terms of model variants, these are currently available in the black or royal blue dials as seen, but definitely check the site links to see if there's any new updates, whether it be different strap options that you might be interested in, or current, dial releases, and just basic availability. I mean, some of you might watch this when it first releases, but most of you will be watching it, much later, as, whenever this pops up in your feed. Now, in terms of comparable models, guys, while dual crown divers have made a clear resurgence over the past few years, not many have actually been equipped with functional super compressor technology, so these watches are real standouts from a functional standpoint. While enthusiast darlings like the Longines Legend Diver stop short at just achieving the look without delving into the historical capabilities associated with the iconic styling. So again, that's a nice positive. So for me, guys, bottom line, Yema continues to impress with models focused on clean retro aesthetics and impressively attainable in-house movements. Their Navygraf Super Compressor is a real standout under $1,000 for those who value clean and versatile styling from outside of your typical mainstream options, and especially those who can appreciate French watchmaking or anyone who values in-house details. But with all that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.